I thought I knew my son. I thought we were close. I thought Christmas would be perfect. I had wrapped the gifts. I had planned the meals. I had imagined his smile when he opened the door. But then he said something that stopped me cold. He said he wasn't expecting me for Christmas. Just like that. A simple sentence. But it hit harder than I ever imagined. I froze. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't understand why. How could he, my own child, make me feel invisible? Was it something I did? Or had I been blind all along? I had spent years sacrificing for him. Working late nights, missing birthdays, skipping vacations. All to give him a life I never had. And now he didn't even expect me. I sat there, staring at my phone. My heart ached in a way I didn't know was possible. And then a thought hit me. A decision that would change everything. But could I really do it? Could I risk everything, just to teach him a lesson he didn't even know he needed? What would happen if I stepped back? For the first time in my life, would he notice me at all? I never imagined that a single phone call could change everything I thought I knew about my own child. It was a quiet December evening, the kind of night that feels like it has been painted in soft shades of gray, with snow tapping gently against the window like tiny whispers. My house smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine, the aroma of Christmas lingering in every corner, warm and comforting. I had been counting down the days, wrapping gifts carefully in bright paper and ribbons, imagining his surprised smile when he opened the door to see me standing there. I had pictured the laughter, the hugs, the shared memories, and the warmth of being together again. I had imagined it so vividly that I felt almost certain it would happen. But the moment I heard his voice on the other end of the line, everything shifted. His words were casual, almost careless, but they hit me like a sudden winter wind. "Mom, I wasn't expecting you for Christmas." Time seemed to slow. The soft ticking of the clock became deafening. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I just sat there, phone in hand, my mind scrambling to understand. Not in anger, not in disbelief, just in that deep, hollow ache that spreads quietly through your chest when someone you love distances themselves in a single sentence. I tried to mask it with a laugh, because that's what I had always done when life caught me off guard. Pretend it didn't matter. I told him it was fine, that I understood. But after we hung up, the quiet of my home felt heavier, almost suffocating. I sank into the armchair by the window, staring at the falling snow, wondering how someone I had nurtured, cared for, and sacrificed everything for could make me feel like an uninvited guest in their life. My heart ached in ways I hadn't expected. Memories of all the times I had stayed up late helping with homework, working extra hours so he could have what he wanted, the birthdays I had missed, the small moments of joy I had skipped so he could have more. Suddenly they all felt invisible. Not gone, just unseen. I realized then that this Christmas would not be the one I had dreamed about. And for the first time in my life, I felt a quiet, knowing fear that my love, my sacrifices, my presence, had been taken for granted in ways I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. If you connect with stories of family, truth, and hard emotions, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel now. This is Betrayal Uncovered, where real emotions meet real stories. And sometimes the most powerful lessons come wrapped in silence. I sat there, staring at the snow, replaying his words again and again, trying to find some hint, some clue, some reason why he would say something so casual that felt so cutting. I remembered all the plans I had made, the meals, the decorations, the little surprises I had bought, each wrapped with love, and the thought that none of it seemed to matter anymore made a slow, creeping ache rise inside me. I realized in that moment that life doesn't always unfold the way you imagine. And sometimes, the people you love most are the ones who remind you of your strength in the quietest, most unexpected ways. Being a single mother had shaped me in ways I hadn't fully understood until that night. I had learned to carry burdens quietly, to wake before the sun, and to fall asleep long after house had gone still. His father had left when he was very young, and suddenly, everything, every responsibility, every worry, every moment of uncertainty, had landed on me alone. There were nights I stayed awake worrying about bills, about school reports, about whether he was sleeping well, whether he had eaten enough, whether he knew he was loved. I worked jobs I didn't always enjoy, hours that felt endless, just to make sure he had what he needed. Vacations, celebrations, little pleasures for myself, all of them had been delayed, pushed aside, quietly sacrificed for the life I wanted to give him. And I told myself over and over again that it was worth it, that it mattered, that it would all pay off in ways I couldn't yet see. When he bought his house, I remember feeling proud, almost giddy, as I handed over a portion of my savings for his down payment. It wasn't because he asked. It wasn't because he couldn't manage on his own. It was because I believed in building him a foundation, a place where he could feel safe, where he could grow, where he could chase his dreams without fear. I did it quietly, without seeking praise, without expecting gratitude. I wanted him to succeed, to thrive, to live a life lighter than mine had been. And I believed that true love never keeps score, that the sacrifices you make are never meant to be remembered. They are meant to be given freely, without strings attached. But that one phone call made me question everything. When he said he wasn't expecting me for Christmas, I felt the weight of all those years of quiet labor hit me at once. I thought about every late night, every skipped opportunity, every moment I had put him first, and I realized that while I had been counting the cost, he hadn't noticed. Not fully, not consciously. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't meant to hurt me, but in that simple, careless sentence, I felt invisible. I felt as though all the care, all the sacrifices, all the love I had poured into him were something he took for granted without even realizing it. It was a painful awakening. I realized that sometimes, the people we love most can show us the truth about ourselves in ways we least expect. And that truth is that love isn't just about giving. It's also about being seen, being acknowledged, and being valued. In that moment, I knew that something had to change. I could no longer allow myself to exist solely in the background of someone else's life, no matter how much I loved them. The next morning, I woke with a quiet determination I hadn't felt before. Christmas was just days away, and yet I realized that the festive excitement I had imagined felt hollow now. I went to my study, a cup of coffee warming my hands, and sat down in front of the computer. My eyes fell on the scheduled mortgage payment for his house, the one I had been covering for years without a word, without expectation, without complaint. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and I felt a strange mix of fear, guilt, and relief. I thought about all the years I had poured myself into his life. The late nights I had worked extra hours just to make ends meet. The mornings I had skipped breakfast to ensure he had what he needed. The birthdays I had quietly sacrificed, the vacations I had postponed, the little pleasures I had denied myself. All so he could have a sense of stability, a sense of comfort, a sense of security that I had given him freely. And yet, here I was, realizing that my presence, my sacrifices, my love, had been taken for granted in ways I had never admitted before, even to myself. I sat there in silence for what felt like hours, staring at the screen, my mind replaying that phone call over and over again. His words echoed in my head. "Mom, I wasn't expecting you for Christmas." It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was casual, almost absent-minded. And yet, it cut deeper than any angry words could. It made me question my worth, my value, and my place in his life. And then, slowly, a thought began to form. Not one of revenge, not one of spite, but a quiet, deliberate realization that maybe it was time to take a step back. Maybe it was time to see if he truly appreciated me for who I was, not just what I provided. My heart ached, but in that ache, there was clarity. I made a decision I had never made before. I canceled the mortgage payment. It wasn't about teaching him a lesson. It wasn't about punishing him. It was about reclaiming myself. About acknowledging that I mattered, that my love mattered, that my presence was not something to be taken for granted. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm mixed with fear, a strange liberation that came from standing up for myself, even in silence. That Christmas, I stayed home. I made a small, simple meal for myself. wrapped a few gifts I had bought long ago, and watched old movies that reminded me of my childhood. I let the quiet fill the space that had once been heavy with expectation. And as I sat there, alone but strangely peaceful, I realized something profound. Sometimes stepping back is the only way to truly see who values you and who doesn't. The weeks that followed were quieter than I had expected. At first, the silence was strange, almost uncomfortable, like an empty room that hadn't been lived in for too long. There were no calls, no messages. No interruptions to remind me of the life I had poured myself into. It was as if the world had slowed down just enough for me to breathe. For the first time in years, without the constant weight of responsibility pressing on my shoulders, I spent my days walking through the snow-dusted streets, savoring the cold air on my face, letting the quiet settle inside me. For a moment, it felt like I was floating, untethered from all the expectations I had carried for so long. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. The sound startled me, and my heart skipped a beat. I picked it up, expecting a friend, a neighbor, or perhaps a wrong number. But it was him. His voice was different, hesitant, tight, uncertain. "Mom, is everything okay? The bank called. Did you forget the payment?" I could hear the concern, though it was wrapped in a layer of defensiveness. A thin attempt to mask his guilt. I took a deep breath and told him the truth. I explained that I hadn't forgotten, that I had chosen to step back, to give myself the space I had neglected for so long. I told him I needed to focus on myself, to remember who I was beyond being his mother, beyond being a provider, beyond being invisible in my own life. There was a long pause, a silence that stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable. Then, finally, he spoke again, his words like a small, hesitant stone dropping into a deep well. "Zoe, you're just not going to help anymore." I felt a wave of emotion rise up, disappointment, hurt, a strange mixture of relief and sadness. In that single sentence, I realized something I had been trying to avoid: love that notices you only when you stop giving isn't love. It is dependency. It is expectation without gratitude. It is the quiet erosion of someone's value without them even realizing it. I didn't argue. I didn't justify myself. I only said that I loved him, that I believed in him, and that he would figure out how to stand on his own, the way I had always hoped he could. I had given him wings, not chains, and it was time for him to use them. That day marked a turning point. I began to understand that stepping back wasn't rejection. It wasn't coldness. It was self-respect. It was teaching, quietly, without words, that love is not measured by what you give, but by mutual recognition, by appreciation, and by care. For the first time, I felt the weight of obligation lift from my shoulders, replaced by a calm certainty that I was no longer invisible in my own life. The months that followed felt like I was slowly waking up after years of sleepwalking through life. Without the constant pull of his expectations, without the weight of responsibility pressing on my shoulders every hour of every day, I began to notice myself again. I noticed the small things I had forgotten. The way the sunlight spilled across the kitchen table in the mornings, the smell of freshly baked bread, the way my hands tingled when I held a paintbrush after years of neglecting it. I joined a walking group and discovered the joy of movement, of breathing in cold, crisp air and feeling alive in my own skin. I laughed more easily, sometimes at silly things, sometimes at nothing at all, and each time, it reminded me that happiness isn't something you give away. It's something you allow yourself to feel. I began painting again, something I hadn't done in decades. At first, I hesitated, unsure if I still remembered how. But with each stroke, each line, each splash of color, I felt a part of myself returning. I realized how much I had let my life revolve around someone else. How much of my identity had been swallowed by the role of caregiver, and how liberating it was to reclaim it. The house was quiet, yes, but it wasn't lonely. It was filled with possibilities, with choices I made for myself, not for anyone else. I reflected on the years of giving, the sacrifices I had made, and I didn't regret them. But I understood something important. Sacrifice without recognition, love without acknowledgement, effort without respect, it can slowly erode your soul. I had given freely because I loved, but I had never realized how much I had allowed myself to fade in the process. And now, stepping back, I felt alive again, whole again. Free to exist beyond the roles I had been forced to play. There was a quiet power in it, a soft strength that I hadn't felt before. I was no longer defined solely by what I provided to my son, or to anyone else. I was defined by my choices, by my presence, by my willingness to honor myself. And in that clarity, I felt a calm determination growing inside me. I would no longer allow my value to be measured only by how much I gave. I would love, yes, but I would also be seen. I would nurture, yes, but I would also protect the core of who I was. And as I sat by the window one evening, watching the snow fall in gentle sheets across the quiet streets, I realized that for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that I could live fully, hope that I could reclaim the life I had put aside, and hope that, in time, my son, and the people around me, would begin to see me for who I truly was, not just what I gave them. It was a small hope at first, fragile and quiet. But it grew with each day, and it reminded me that stepping back doesn't mean losing. It means finding yourself again. Months passed, and life began to feel steadier, lighter, like a heavy coat had been removed after years of wearing it. I focused on myself, on the quiet joys that had been hidden beneath the weight of giving. I painted, walked, laughed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, I felt a sense of peace settle into the corners of my life that had been empty for so long. I had grown stronger without even realizing it, not because I had stopped loving him, but because I had learned to love myself too. Then, one evening, as the sky turned a soft gray and the air carried the faint scent of winter, I heard a knock at my door. My heart skipped a beat, a mixture of surprise and apprehension. I wasn't expecting anyone, not him, not anyone. I opened the door and there he was. His expression was different than I had ever seen. Tired, humbled, hesitant. He didn't step inside right away. He lingered on the porch, shifting from foot to foot, unsure, almost like a little boy caught between fear and hope. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than usual, almost fragile. "Mom, I didn't realize how much you were doing. I didn't realize how much I took you for granted." His words weren't angry, weren't defensive. They carried something deeper. A recognition, a dawning awareness of the years I had silently given, the sacrifices I had made, and the love I had offered without expecting anything in return. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to forgive or reassure him. I let him speak. Let him spill the weight of guilt and realization he had been carrying, perhaps unknowingly. He told me about Christmas, about how awkward and empty it had felt without me, how he had assumed I would always be there, how he hadn't seen the depth of what I had done for him. Every word he spoke was a mirror reflecting the truth I had known all along. Sometimes the people we love most fail to see us until we step back, until we are no longer endlessly available. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just a conversation, it was a turning point. The bridge between us had been fragile, but it still existed. And it could be rebuilt, not through dependence, not through guilt, but through mutual recognition, respect, and understanding. I felt a mixture of relief and cautious hope. I saw in his eyes a willingness to change, a quiet acknowledgement that what he had once taken for granted was irreplaceable. That evening, I understood something vital. Sometimes people only recognize your worth when you give them space to see it. And sometimes, stepping back, even when it feels painful, is the most powerful act of love you can offer. Not just to yourself, but to those you care for most. The silence that had once been heavy and suffocating was now filled with possibility, with a chance for connection to grow in a way it never had before. After that evening, things began to shift between us, slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. I didn't rush to forgive him, and he didn't expect it. Instead, we began rebuilding a connection that had been frayed for years, brick by brick, with patience and care. I helped when I chose to, not because it was expected or demanded, but because I wanted to, because it felt right. And he began to notice, not just the big things, but the small gestures, the effort, the love that had always been there but had been taken for granted. Respect, I realized, grows in the spaces where entitlement once lived. It grows when someone has the chance to understand the depth of what they had before it was taken for granted. He began to listen differently. He asked questions. He checked in without prompting. He expressed gratitude, sometimes clumsy, sometimes hesitant, but genuine. I could see that he was learning, slowly, that love is not about expecting everything from someone else. It is about noticing, valuing, and appreciating. For me, it was liberating. I no longer felt that my love or my value depended solely on his recognition. I had learned to honor my own needs, to nurture myself as I had nurtured him, and to find joy without waiting for validation. I realized that boundaries were not walls to keep someone out, they were bridges to healthier relationships. By standing firm in my own worth, I allowed him the chance to grow, to see, to change. There were days when it still hurt, when memories of neglect and casual disregard surfaced. But those moments became smaller, less sharp, because I knew I had chosen myself first. And choosing myself didn't mean abandoning love. It meant showing him, and myself, what real love looks like. Real love doesn't demand. Real love doesn't take. Real love notices, respects, and appreciates. We began sharing moments again, little ones at first. Coffee on weekend mornings, quiet walks. Conversations that didn't revolve around obligation or expectation. I could feel the bond we had always had, the deep connection beneath it all, beginning to heal, and while things were not the same as they had once been, they were better, stronger, healthier. Built on awareness and mutual respect, not assumption and entitlement. I understood, finally, that the lessons I had hoped to teach through my sacrifices were now being learned. Slowly, quietly, my son was discovering the meaning of gratitude, of appreciation, and of true connection. And I, in turn, was discovering the power of standing firm in my own worth, of loving without losing myself, and of allowing relationships to grow in a way that honored everyone involved. Looking back now, I see that moment, when he said he wasn't expecting me for Christmas, as the moment that changed everything. At the time, it felt like a quiet, painful cut, a reminder that love can sometimes be unrecognized, even when it is freely given. But with distance, with reflection, I realized it was also a gift. It forced me to step back, to see myself as more than a provider, more than someone whose value was measured only by what I could do for others. It reminded me that respect is not selfish, and that boundaries are not walls. They are necessary guides that allow love to flourish in a healthy way. I learned that stepping back isn't about withholding love or holding grudges. It's about claiming your own worth, reclaiming your identity, and showing those around you what respect, acknowledgement, and true appreciation look like. It is the quiet, firm knowledge that you are not invisible, that your presence is not a given, and that the love you offer is valuable. My son's eventual understanding, his hesitant apologies, and his willingness to change were all reflections of the lesson I had learned first, that love, when it is real, requires awareness, not entitlement. Now, our relationship is different. It's healthier, slower, more intentional. I help when I want to help, not out of obligation. He notices now, in small ways at first, the check-in call, the thoughtful gesture, the simple expression of gratitude. I feel seen, I feel respected, and in that, there is a peace I had never experienced before, a quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing I have chosen myself without sacrificing love. If you have ever felt unseen, unappreciated, or taken for granted, I want you to take a moment and reflect on this. Your love is precious, but so is your self-respect. Choosing yourself does not mean choosing against someone you love. It means honoring your own worth and allowing those around you to recognize it too. If this story resonates with you, I encourage you to comment below and share your own experiences. Tell us how you have learned to set boundaries, to reclaim yourself, or to rebuild a relationship with respect and understanding. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share this video with them. Sometimes, the hardest truths we face are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves, our strength, and our capacity to love wisely. This is Betrayal Uncovered, and sometimes, uncovering betrayal means finally choosing yourself, standing firm in your worth and showing others, quietly, patiently, what true love and respect really look like.